Thank you, Chair. We are now live on YouTube, so I'll hand over to you.
You're on mute, Colin. Yeah, beg your pardon.
Sorry, yeah. Right, I'm unmuted. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual scrutiny meeting on the 4th of March 2021. I am your chair, Councillor Colin Brown. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the code of conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this scrutiny meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the connection or power cut, please bear with us while we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee pages on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphones, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Councillor Chubb.
Yes, present.
Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor Johns.
Present. Thank you, Sarah.
Councillor King.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor McCollum.
Present. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Parr.
Present.
Councillor Rylance.
Present.
Councillor Pepper. Councillor Pepper.
He's not well at the moment.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
And Councillor Chris Wright.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 1 is public speaking, and there are no members of the public registered to speak. Agenda item 2, minutes from the previous meeting. Before I take members' comments on the minutes of the 4th of February 2021, I would like to make the committee aware that the service lead for street scene has raised an issue regarding minute 128, question 9. The service leads has advised the supplementary question to question 9 was incorrect, stating that the cost to EDDC was closer to 75,000 and not 250,000 for the section relation to Exmouth, as stated in the question. It was a joint beach management plan covering Dawlish as well as led by the Environment Agency. As such, the overall cost, including Dawlish, is as well may have been slightly higher. Members will recall this minute was called by Councillor Jugg at the council meeting held on the 24th of February. The minutes of this meeting are recorded, a record rather, of what took place, and members are asked to agree the accuracy of the minute, but may also wish to note that the figure which is stated at the meeting was an incorrect figure. Right, so the minutes of the previous meeting. Would members like to raise their hand accordingly?
Sorry,
Chair,
Chair. Sorry, Henry. Go on.
Go on.
So I just
Henry,
wanted
yes.
to clarify whether we're actually adopting the minutes as you've just stated, revised or not.
Well, sorry. Yes, I was going to ask the same question, whether you're voting or whether you're inviting comments. We just need to be clear about that. But either way, the minutes won't be changed because they are reflective of what was said. This is simply a point of clarification to make members aware. But actually, the minutes stand as the record.
Yeah.
And the figure will be there. So, but I don't know what the Chair, perhaps you can clarify whether you're asking for members to confirm the.
Well, I mean, we're asking to confirm the minutes as written at the time. It's just been clarified that there was a slight change.
So if all those in voting in favour, Chair, is that what you're asking?
Yes, please.
So if all those in voting in favour, if you can use your green tick, please. All those against, if you could use your red cross, please. You can vote now. Thank you. That's 12 in favour, Chair. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Sarah.
Sorry, no. Thank you.
That's, yes, 12 in favour, carried, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, apologies. Are there?
Chair, no apologies from members of the committee, but non-member Councillor Paul Miller has sent apologies because he has an item on the agenda later.
Thank you. Item 4, declaration of interest. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. We'll do declarations by roll call. Councillor Brown.
None.
Councillor Ranger.
None.
Councillor Chapman.
None.
Councillor Chubb.
I declare I'm a Devon County Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Exmouth Town Councillor.
Sorry, can we just make it clear that we're declaring whether you're declaring personals or DPIs, and in relation to which item, please? Councillor Chubb.
Just declaring I'm Devon County Councillor in case it comes up in anything.
Okay, so personal interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Coleman.
Exmouth Town Councillor.
And is that a personal interest?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Also Exmouth Town Councillor. I think that's particularly relevant to one of the proposal forms, which I think was submitted by Councillor Chapman, in fact.
Thank
Personal.
you. Councillor Hawkins.
Personal, Henry, yes, thank you.
No, none that I'm aware of, thank you.
Councillor Johns.
Sorry. I'm an Ottery St Mary Town Councillor as well, which I believe is of personal interest in item 10, the proposal forms received with the production of the local plan, because I know that Ottery Town Council have submitted theirs. And I don't know whether or not, I mean, I'm obviously exceptionally interested personally with item 7 on the agenda, to be honest with you, staff morale, etc., which I think we all should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
None, thank you.
Councillor McCollum.
None, thank you.
Councillor Parr.
None. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance.
None, Sarah, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
None.
And Councillor Chris Wright.
A personal interest with respect to item 10 on the agenda, the playing pitch strategy. I'm a director of Exmouth Rugby Club, a tenant of East Devon District Council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Agenda item 7, decisions made by Cabinet called in by members for scrutiny in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rules. There are no items. Agenda item 8, report on staff morale. It was agreed at the previous meeting to invite the CEO to report on findings of the recent staff survey. To assist members with their discussion, I would like to welcome Mark Everton from the Unison, who will be able to help with advice of a general nature. Pages have been stuck together. Please remind members that discussions of employment matters, including staff morale, should at all times remain general and not refer or identify individuals in any way. This evening's meeting is before scrutiny could consider the report regarding staff morale, which has raised some serious issues which must be addressed as a matter of urgency. The format for tonight's meeting is that I will take a limited number of speakers who are not members of the committee to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Please, can we not have any repetitions of previous speakers? Also, there must not be any names mentioned. I will not accept any motions or recommendations from non-members of the committee to go to council. Also, there will not be any supplementary questions due to time restraints. Those not on the committee who wish to be called to speak must put their blue hands up and wait, and I will select members to speak. When we have a flavour of what members are saying, we will not take any further speakers and we will open it up to the committee to debate. Do you want to say the next bit, Henrik? Or
Sorry, which bit was that?
The chair legal will intervene to remind members of this point of discussion relating to the individual should be held in part B, and the intention is for this meeting to remain in part A, public session. I will now hand over to Mark Williams to present his report. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. So if I could take members to my report and the front page where I start at report summary. As you can see, as the Chairman's just confirmed, this report comes following expressions of concern that were made by committee members. And in particular, in response to those concerns, I did conduct a health and safety executive approved form of survey over a 10-day period. And you can see there that 67% of the staff responded within that 10-day period. And clearly this report highlights matters for the committee to assess. I have had a couple of queries from members about my choice of this particular survey, but I can confirm that the survey is a recommended form of survey with a proven methodology for analysing work-related stress. In particular, it asks staff to focus on their last 6 months at work. So the information given by the staff is both timely and reliable. And also, for that matter, the response rate. The response rate, I think, is a good one. And therefore, again, you can rely on what the staff are saying in that report. In terms of a recommendation or recommendations, I didn't think it was appropriate at this stage for me to come forward with recommendations because much will depend on whether the committee accepts what staff are saying in the survey. There is work, however, that I will be getting on with in terms of the issues that have been identified, but quite clearly there is a requirement for member engagement in terms of some of the issues that have been raised by staff. Taking you further into the report, I just want to highlight as well the legal implications. I have summarised them quite simply as the council as employer will want to assure itself that it is providing an appropriate working environment which minimises the risks of employment-based legal claims being made against it. However, it's fair for me to say, I think as well, that I have a duty of care to my employees. I have a legal obligation to keep them safe from harm. And I think what the survey shows and what this report is addressing is the difficulty I have in fulfilling this duty and obligation when the harm results from member behaviour towards staff. So I think that's important for you to be mindful of when you're considering potential recommendations, please. So I start with some background, because clearly I think it is relevant that we traditionally have been an organisation where staff morale has been high, and I refer the committee to two particular documents, the LGA peer review and also the more recent Investors in People accreditation award letter. And I picked out a quote, I think particularly because of the use of the word inspirational by the assessor in terms of what she found here, in terms of the staff, the work that they do, and the way in which the organisation has been managed hitherto. And I think it's important to mention, Chairman, that both the peer review and the IIP assessment provide independent external validation of the quality of our organisation. And as such, they are very important to staff morale. I have also shared with our IIP assessor this report and discussed the matter initially with her. It's fair to say she's very concerned at the latest survey results, and she is currently helping me with a compare and contrast analysis to help with follow-up action work. But that's currently work in hand. She's busy on other matters at the moment. So if I come to section 2 of the report, which I head as staff morale and sickness during COVID-19, I start with a general point. Obviously, we were relatively fortunate in Devon and the West Country generally that COVID to a degree impacted relatively lightly on our area compared to other parts of the country. And particularly, I think, there were a lot of initiatives that the government brought forward which required the council to respond in a quick way and a timely way. And as far as I'm aware, I certainly haven't heard anything to the contrary. The public particularly have been appreciative of all the initiatives that we took on board in terms of grant schemes, support for the local economy and vulnerable people. In terms of the staff themselves, clearly there was the challenge of home working. Not all staff have worked from home during the period, but the vast majority have. Clearly some staff, street scene staff, housing staff, have been going out, doing their work on site, and a relatively small number of staff who've been unable to work from home have worked at Blackdown House in the main, and only about 2 or 3 staff working out of Exmouth Town Hall. After the first period of lockdown, we did decide to carry out a staff survey just to assess, how well we had or hadn't done in terms of helping the organisation through that sort of first period of COVID lockdown. And I've appended the results of that survey, which we did in June of last year as Appendix 1. There were some concerns expressed in that survey, as you'll see, around workload and also the practical impact of working from home. And I think as managers, there was also a message that we took from staff around the fact of needing to put extra effort into engaging and communicating with staff whilst we weren't sort of meeting regularly for team meetings or meeting, in this sort of office environment, if you like. That survey was done and actions taken, as I've highlighted in paragraph 2.2. And then we moved into the summer and the autumn of last year. And what started to become noticeable was a pickup in the rates of sickness absence, but particularly not just the rate of sickness absence, but the reasons being given for absence. And you can see in paragraph 2.3, I've referred to depression, stress and anxiety coming forward as the reasons for absence. I've provided you a table in terms of staff absences which is accurate up to the end of January. The member of staff who helps me with the table is working on the February figures, but they're not available, I'm afraid, for tonight's meeting. But what you can see with regard to that table is that, we have a target of no more than 8.5 days lost to sickness per member of staff. And that's, if you like, an average taken across a variety of industries. And it certainly seems that we will exceed that target at the moment. I've also done some further analysis of the sickness records, and these show that there has been an overall increase of almost 66% in all absences relating to depression and stress in the 10-month period, April 20 to January 21, compared with the same period for the previous year. And also overall so far this year, 42 employees, or 8.4% of the workforce, have cited depression or stress as the reason for absence. We will be carrying out a more in-depth analysis of absence at the year end, so that'll be in April of this year, because I have picked up already from some of the data that I've been shown that figure I've given you is probably an underestimate, but it's based purely on the sick notes as originally provided to us in terms of what was presented to the certifying physician at the time that the member of staff attended the surgery. So then we come on to our latest survey. And the way I carried out the survey and the structure of the survey allows some quantitative analysis across the teams of the council, and also some qualitative analysis in terms of what staff are saying. So Appendix 2 provides you with some details of the quantitative analysis. And there is a good picture in respect of some of it. It is showing that the highest scoring returns were in respect of role, peer support and relationships. So that suggests to me that the work that we've done over the years, the work that was recognised in the peer review, the work that was recognised in the IIP assessment is holding good in terms of sort of the inherent strength of the teams within themselves and within their relationships and the support they get from fellow team members. However, what is becoming apparent, or what is appearing as a factor, is the issue of bullying. You can see that 6% of respondents stated that in the last 6 months they were sometimes bullied at work, and 11% have stated that they were seldom bullied, but I think it's the recognition that they were bullied which you should take particular note of. I mean, if you look at the questions to the survey, it's quite an interesting way in terms of how the questions are structured, because it's actually quite a bold issue to address about bullying, and for staff to actually recognise that, yes, in fact, they are being bullied, I think should be given a significant weight. You can also see there, in terms of the issue of personal harassment in the form of unkind words and behaviour, then the percentage is greater than the bold sort of approach in terms of bullying. So I certainly think that members should be rightly concerned that bullying is starting to feature as a matter that staff are saying is apparent within the workplace over the last 6 months. And then the two lowest scoring, and therefore in terms of the way that the HSE survey is structured, the two lowest scoring workplace stressors are in regard to demand and change. And you can see towards the end of paragraph 3.2, I've highlighted the sort of factors that staff are commenting on: having to work intensively, having to work very fast, having to neglect some tasks, different groups demanding things that are hard to combine, etc. And then, although to a degree, there is a sort of an average line that you can see from Appendix 2 going across the teams, if you look at the three teams that clearly come across as a priority for further assessment, they are housing, street scene and planning. and arguably the three teams of HROD, countryside and economy fare better, but in fact I think there's work to be done across all the teams to understand why some teams are faring worse than other teams, and B, to maybe learn from the teams that have scored slightly more highly. And then Appendix 3 contains a qualitative analysis of the comments that staff chose to make when they were submitting their returns. And you can see that 33% of staff felt that they wanted to give comments as part of the survey response. And what I've done in terms of the most positive comments and the most common negative comments is to highlight those where there were responses in the double figures from staff, although you can see if you go to Appendix 3 that there are a range of other comments, but they come across in different numbers and certainly below the double figures. So again, reflective of the IIP assessment, the most common positive comments were that colleagues and the team are supportive, and that has been, particularly noticeable in terms of those teams which have taken on government schemes. There's been a real sense of pulling together to make this work, for the benefit of the district, and also staff saying that their manager is supportive. And then you come on to the most common negative comments. And you can see clearly that there's a degree of anger, frustration, and unhappiness coming through from staff in terms of workload, the speed with which we're able to replace those staff who choose to leave, the conduct of some councillors, and then other issues, particularly if you like, relating to the impact of the pandemic on home life, particularly if you're homeschooling children and trying to combine working with homeschooling. And they're there for you to note, and also happy to expand on those in some detail if required. So then I offer some concluding considerations for the committee to consider. And I think it's important to repeat again that we've regularly carried out staff surveys and always treated the results with respect. They've helped build up a picture of a hard-working organisation and a well-earned reputation for the council as a good employer. But what this survey is highlighting is a number of issues and a growing problem with staff morale. Clearly, in terms of relevant factors, we are in the pandemic still. There's obviously a degree of optimism around the vaccination programme and the ability that will bring with it to have a relaxation of lockdown restrictions. So it is a relevant factor to consider. But I think in that sense, you would be entitled to try and sort of say, well, the June 2020 survey showed one thing, the February 21 survey is showing us a different thing. But it is clear to me that depression, stress and anxiety amongst staff is of course concern. And I've absolutely no doubt that many officers are continuing to work whilst being depressed or otherwise impacted. So the incidence of staff absence, is distressing enough in itself. But you shouldn't underestimate the conditions, if you like, and the experiences that staff are bringing with them to work in terms of how they feel about the current situation. The second issue I've put there is in relation to staff absence, staffing levels, and the issue of workload. And clearly there are some issues that I need to look at in terms of trying to better understand with the managers where we can prioritise work, where we can say, no, this has to wait. And in some cases, I think giving the teams and the managers themselves confidence to say, you don't just always respond to the person who's shouting the loudest, you respond to the work which needs to be done in priority order. But I do think there are enough references in the survey to additional pressures resulting from changing political behaviours, uncertain organisational direction, and a more hands-on challenging approach to operational matters that haven't been a feature of our previous ways of working, and they need to be taken into account as well. And then finally, in terms of particularly, I think, the impact of member behaviour on managers. The change in the political culture and the working environment that has been experienced by them does have a consequential impact within the organisation. I'm quite happy to admit that from my personal perspective, it's very hard to maintain a high sense of morale and to motivate my staff when I'm not necessarily feeling it myself because of what I'm experiencing in terms of some of the issues that have been highlighted in the staff survey. And I come really to the final 2 paragraphs of, if you like, a quite brief compare and contrast between what was and what appears to be is, if you like, as now things stand. And in paragraph 4.5, I think I can summarise those factors as saying that there was a real sense of being one team, members and officers together, in terms of addressing the issues for the district and delivering a high-performing, hard-working organisation. But in paragraph 4.6, I highlight the fact that the latest survey suggests these factors are now less noticeable and they've been replaced by some issues which I think need members' urgent attention. And I end with a comment with regard to particular concerns that some officers have expressed to me around the code of conduct, the way in which it is enforced, and the way in which it is perceived by some councillors. And I end with a particular sort of question, if I like, for you as councillors, which is that is of particular concern in terms of the council's future reputation as a good employer and possible legal liabilities in terms of employment-based claims as to whether the changes we've experienced over the last 6 months are temporary changes or whether we're to regard them as permanent changes. So happy to answer any questions, Chairman, that come from my report or from the appendices, and I'll leave it to you now.
Chair, you're on mute.
Right, sorry. Well, the committee and members will come back with questions later, I would imagine, Mark. And next speaker is Mark Everton from Unison.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite. I think probably just to give you a bit of context, my name's Mark Everton. I work for Unison, the trade union, as a regional organiser. But my role is kind of really about working with employers around things like training and development and stuff like that, and working with union branches. But the reason when Unison was extended the invite that my colleagues came to me was because over the last 5 years or so, I've been doing a lot of work working with employers on the issue of stress, mental health issues in the workplace. And so, I mean, I've gained kind of a bit of experience, but I thought probably the best way to kind of serve this committee tonight would be just basically if I just gave you my experience and what I've observed, because I think there are common things that I've seen that are lessons that can be taken about dealing with stress, dealing with mental health in the workplace, but also about what happens if it's not dealt with and it's left or it's just kind of kicked down the road a little bit. I mean, the first observation is just the sheer cost of it. And I see this again and again with employers. And again, I'm not going to mention specific employers, obviously, because that's confidential with us and those other employers. I will say, though, in the last 3 years, about 50% of the employers that I've been working with have been local authorities or councils of various descriptions around the southwest region. But one thing is that the cost, and that comes up again and again when I talk to employers, and it's clear when they're looking at kind of where they're losing money around the issue of stress and mental health. I mean, it costs approximately, and I've taken a range of sources from the government to finance organisations who look at these kind of things. It's about £45 billion a year is what it costs employers in dealing with stress or mental health issues in the workplace, and a lot of that comes from the things that happen when it's not really dealt with. And I think a couple of things that's already been mentioned. First of all, this sick absence. Now, for me, what I've observed over the years is sick absence is like the canary in the coal mine. When you see that start going up, you know that it's, in conjunction with maybe you've done, like as you've done here with a survey or whatever, that always sets off warning bells for me, because I think you can start to see how the issue's building. It costs 10.6 billion a year for employers in terms of sick absence. And it can be like dominoes falling, because what happens is that you've, and again, I've seen this again and again, where when people go off sick because of stress or mental health issues, then the people that are in work, their work increases. Like, no matter how you kind of organise the work, there is some additional pressure put on. So it kind of spreads sometimes. Is the next person who's then covering that work ends up being the next person who potentially could go off sick. Also as well, what you tend to find is that it tends to be for longer periods of time as well, which gets on to the second point. Now, you think the sick absence would be the biggest cost to employers, but actually the biggest cost, and this figure comes from both Deloitte and Personnel Today, who did a big study of this. The biggest loss of money for employers comes from productivity issues of people that are in the workplace, and presenteeism, people coming to work, but they're not, they are still feeling stressed. They're not working their best. They don't feel as connected to kind of the work and the workplace. That costs £21 billion a year to employers. So it's a half of the cost comes from people in the workplace with stress not being dealt with. The other thing that I always notice as well is the increase in turnover of staff. That is always a factor. That's always there in some form or another. Benenden Health, the private health company, has worked out that a quarter of all employers in this country in the last 5 or 6 years have lost key members of staff due to not tackling stress or mental health issues. And what we mean by key members of staff is those people in the workplace that have got the most experience, the most knowledge. You also tend to find then that as stress becomes a bigger problem in the workplace, the first people that you lose are the people with the most experience, the most qualified, because they're in a position to get a job maybe easier than other people, because they can go to another employer and say, well, look, I've got all this experience and all this, I'm qualified to do all these things. And so you end up kind of losing that experience. And that's the fourth thing that I always see, is that loss of experience in the workplace. And certainly with one employer, we identified this real vicious circle in that some key people had left, but there was no one left to really train anyone up to the standard that was required of that job. And then what happened with that particular department was there was this vicious circle of the work wasn't being done up to the level required, and then customer complaints came in, or complaints from the public came in, and that actually created more stress, and so things weren't again done as well, which created more. So we had this vicious cycle. It was like, how do we look at breaking that? And one of the things was we really need to look at staff turnover and also the key people that might be leaving. I think it's mentioned about reputational damage. I think that's true. When you've got employers that, and again, there can be all kinds of reasons for staff turnover, but you always see it there with stress. I've always seen it with every employer that I've dealt with. the thing is, people in local communities know. I mean, I can tell you, I live in Bristol, and I could tell you about 3 employers that I've heard from other people. I don't go for a job with them because of this, this, and this. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's kind of, it shows how that can happen. Also, as well, people notice if the same job is being advertised over and over again in the local press, they very often ask questions about why is that. And what the problem is there, it goes back to what I said about the turnover of staff and how you get people that can replace those jobs, is that, you know, you may not attract the best staff because the best staff are thinking, well, I'm not sure I want to work there because I've heard these things. And I'm sure as any employer, you would like to attract the best people to do the work. So I mean, it's kind of, these are things that I've observed. Also, as well, you know, things like grievances. I've got to, you know, I work for a union, so I'm probably I'm going to mention this, but things like grievances go up, and there's the potential for something getting to a tribunal or something like that goes up if stress is not dealt with early. Now, I'm not saying that as a union person going, oh, this is what's going to happen, because one thing that I've learned through all the work that I've done is these are absolutely avoidable possibilities, that these outcomes aren't inevitable. And I'm going to finish off by just saying what I found that works. This is what has worked, and really, and sometimes it can be a long-term process. This isn't stress. Mental health issues are not an overnight fix. If they were, and I knew how to do it, I could probably make lots of money telling companies all about it and what have you, but it's not. And that's the problem, is that it is very often unique to each employer. The causes can be unique. The way it plays out can be unique. But things that I found that work is, first of all, early intervention. I think once you see those sick absences going up, once you see the stuff that's in the report, you know, the survey, I think it's not something to wait for. It's like you need to discuss it as early as you possibly can. The other thing is involving staff and regular follow-up and checking in with them. I think very often what I've suggested to, you know, what I've suggested in these cases is, if you've got a survey, pick out the issues that you've got the real concern about, and then do like a mini survey based around those issues. Like dig down to try and find out what the root causes are and where that's coming from. And checking in, you know, doing that fairly regular, not in a way that staff are sat there thinking, God, why do they keep asking me why am I, yeah, every day they're asking me whether I'm okay. But every so often have a method whereby you can check in with staff, and also that they can report their stress or even just talk about it without the fear of being sanctioned, without the fear of, you know, if I say this, is this going to affect me adversely? The most important thing is to have an honest conversation about it. And sometimes you even have to drill down into, we had one place where it was a local authority, obviously not saying where, but there was an issue of kind of stress amongst recycling and refuse workers. And what we found out the problem there was that very often the men, because it was predominantly men that were working in that job, when they had meetings, it was with other staff. And actually I said, well, let's just have a meeting of just the men together and just getting them to talk. And I've never seen them open up so much. It was like it kind of took the pressure off them. So there's all, you have to think about that, about what is the best way to get people to talk. I mean, look, the figure that I give is that, and again, this comes from Deloitte, the financial analysis company, is for every £1 an employer spends on proactive mental health interventions, you will get £5 back in terms of productivity, less staff turnover, more engagement from staff. But also as well, it needs a proper real objective engagement. So it needs to be a real engagement, not just kind of like, you know, okay, well, we've heard you, thank you very much. One thing that I think is really important, and sometimes employers find this, you know, say, well, are you sure we want to do that? It's actually asking staff, what do you want us to do? Asking for, that doesn't mean you're saying, okay, you call the shots and we'll do whatever you want. But asking that question, what do you want us to do, can really give you options. But it's got to be done in a way that people feel that they're able to say this kind of safely, and that's got to be made really, really clear. I'll just conclude by saying that this is just my experience and observation over quite a few employers. This issue isn't unique to your council. It's an issue across the country at the moment, and especially with COVID, that's created all kinds of new layers of way people are either coping or not coping, or stress is coming out. I want to finish, unusually for a trade union, I want to finish on a high though, and say, I think as Mark said, when I saw the survey, one thing that really stood out to me, the real strength, is that whole idea of that kind of team spirit. They feel connected, they kind of feel as though they've got the peer support and they can support each other. I've always found if you've got something like that, that's a real strength in taking the issue forward. Because I've seen employers where that has gone, where the goodwill's gone, teams have fallen out with each other, and that's much, much more difficult to actually then put some solutions in. I think you're in a place where, you know, it's not the worst case scenario by any means. And I think, you know, there are things that you can do. But from my point of view, I thought I just want to give you experience rather than come along and say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, or whatever. I just thought I'd give you my experience and hopefully it might be helpful for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for that. Right, I've got a list of speakers here. Bearing in mind you've only got 3 minutes and you can't mention anything about motions, etc., or recommend any motions or mention any names. The first speaker I've got is John Loudon. Councillor John Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Right, first of all, I take this survey very seriously, as I'm sure everybody does, and it is a snapshot and indicator about staff concerns. But as a staff survey, it is not a political tool. Staff and their concerns shouldn't be used as political footballs by any of us. And they should not be dealt with in a partisan way. I think we need to do, as Mark Everton said, set this against the backdrop of the pandemic. That clearly has an impact on how people have responded. But because of time, I want to take you to Appendix 3, page 1, and the comments there. And I want to drill down into a key phrase that I'm sure many will now home in on, and that's the phrase new councillors stroke the new political leadership, and the link to poor behaviours towards staff and seeking apparently to micromanage. Firstly, the use of new councillors and the new political leadership is a broad phrase used to collate comments made by staff relating to some or possibly all members. Secondly, the phrase conflates two sets of members, both new members, i.e. those who joined, like myself, in May 2019, and an unspecified set of members are regarded as leadership. In May 2019, 24 new members were elected. So Councillor Moulding, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Blakey, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Arnott, each of you have new members in your group. So the phrase new members could apply to any and each group that is here. And I say to those of you who are standing in a greenhouse with a pile of stones next to you, be careful what happens when you pick those stones up and try throwing them. The other part of the phrase is the new political leadership. I presume this must refer to the cabinet and the broader leadership of the ruling group. And as part of that, I recognise that we need all to look at what we're doing, to look at the implications of what we're doing and how we need to change. And I hope that everybody, each group leader, will be honest and look at their group and say, can we do things better? This is not a partisan issue. Thank you. I hope that we can invite the Chief Executive to go away with his SMT, look at the detail of what needs to be done to support staff, and to come back to this committee and give an update. I'm very happy to work with the Chief Executive and the SMT as portfolio holder. And Chair, if I may finish, I may wish to, perhaps I ought to declare an interest, given that Mark Everton is here, and his organisation pays me a pension. So there is a personal interest there. I will stop at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry. And the next speaker is Councillor Alan Dent, and the same applies to you regarding 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions for Mark Everton. Mark, thank you very much for giving us the broad picture and the background. I've got a couple of questions just to pin things down a little to make it relevant, more relevant to this meeting. And my first question is, how does this council rate, in your view, with the national norm in terms of sickness absence? It's question one. Question two, because obviously it's clearly linked, is that do you feel the level of stress and mental health now being highlighted in the report is seriously above or with or below the levels experienced in other councils? Two questions for Mark. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Mark,
I'm not. Yeah, I said I'm not quite sure of the format. So do I come in now and?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be. I'm probably. I mean, the thing is that how does this council rate in terms of sick absence? Well, the problem is I don't know exactly what your sick absence rate is, and so I'm not 100% sure. One thing I will say though is that you know, I think what you need to look at is there a rise that's happening that is not kind of, yeah, is there something different happening that wasn't happening last year or the year before? I think comparisons to previous years are really, really useful. So again, sorry, without exact figures, and I don't want to kind of just say something and not be informed by figures. Do I feel that the stress that is highlighted is above? I think it's really, again, I know I'm probably giving all the answers here, but I think the thing with stress is that it is so unique. It's not like something that you can measure one place against another. So you could have less stress in a workplace, or it could be concentrated in an area within a workplace that actually could be more debilitating. It could have a bigger effect on people than a more widespread stress somewhere else. It's so different. I think what I've seen is that, I mean, personally, when I read the report, I didn't fall off my chair and go, oh my God, this is so terrible. But what I did say is, yeah, there are some things there that definitely need looking at. Sorry, it's a bit of a woolly answer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Mark, can you answer that question? Mark Williams, can you answer the question regarding staff absences in the different this year to last year?
Yes, I mean, I certainly gave an indication in terms of the 66% increase in things being attributed to depression, stress and anxiety. And I think what I would say was that perhaps longer serving members of Scrutiny will recall this being a regular question over the years with regard to sickness absence, and hitherto where we were getting close to or above the 8.5 target, it was mainly due to issues relating to cancer or skeletal muscular problems affecting the older staff, particularly the older street scene staff. And what is clear to me is that has changed quite considerably, over the last 6 months, and we're now seeing the the depression, stress, and anxiety thing coming through. And I take Mark's point about it's difficult to make comparisons because each organisation is unique. And I think what I would say is, for us, it's a problem. I think, fortunately, because the committee wanted this report, members are being told of something that isn't long-standing, because the survey has focused on the last 6 months, and you've got some comparative data to look back on in the previous year. What is important, I think, is that you take this seriously and you agree amongst yourselves what you can do to help resolve the issue fundamentally.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Jess Bailey.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I was, as you know, portfolio holder for corporate services for around 20 months until I was sacked in January. Sadly, none of the content of this report comes as any great surprise to me. I would say that from an organisational well-being point of view, it's been on a downward trajectory for quite a few months. And I think that I would just like to pick out just a couple of points that are of concern to me. And I think one of the things that I have felt is that members don't necessarily draw on the experience of their officers and listen to their officers. And I would say tonight is a case in point with Councillor Loudon. And I'm not making a political point, but we've had our chief executive come and give a really, really serious report. And I'm afraid that I found the response rather dismissive to the concerns. Describing it as a snapshot of concerns, picking apart whether it's new councillors or new political leadership, and then to refer to the chief executive to go away with his SMT and bring back another report. And I think the chief executive has told us that he's told us this evening he has a duty of care to the employees and he has difficulty fulfilling that duty. So I think as members, we need to really, really carefully look at our code of conduct, understand what the issues are, why things are going wrong, and try and do something about it. And I know that Councillor Loudon did talk about all the different groups doing that, but I think we need to understand there's reference in the report to people not taking the code of conduct seriously. And I think more work needs to be done about that. And I think in terms of the future direction, I think we need to develop an action plan. Part of it is, of course, driven by the chief executive in conjunction with his senior officers. And part of it is the members taking responsibility and understanding and calling out unacceptable behaviour when they see it. Thank you.
Chair, I've just been named. Can I come back on that, please?
No, I said I wouldn't allow anybody to come back.
I've just been named, though, Chair.
I know you have.
And what I said has been misinterpreted, misconstrued, and put across inappropriately.
Right, you've had your bit, so no, you cannot come back any more than you have done. Thank you very much, Councillor Loudon. Right, the next person to speak is Councillor Ben Ingham, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. In September 2019, the LGA peer review described us as an organisation with a hard-working and committed workforce. Until recently, East Devon has always been an organisation where staff morale has been high. In January 2020, the Council achieved Platinum Investors in People status, the highest achievable. Previous to that, the Council was at Gold level for 6 years. We are only the 3rd local government authority to achieve Platinum status. In June 2020, a staff survey was carried out to see how we fared during the first part of the pandemic. Overall, the feeling of staff was that they had adapted well to the pandemic. there was an optimistic feeling within the organisation at the end of the first period of lockdown. The February 2021 survey shows that optimism has disappeared, replaced by depression, stress and anxiety amongst staff. Many officers continue to work despite being depressed or otherwise impacted. The survey refers to additional pressures resulting from changing political behaviours, uncertain organisational direction, and a more interfering approach to operational matters not seen in the past. That's the leadership micromanaging officers whilst failing to address the council plan. When our CEO compared where we are with where we were, this time last year, the following factors facilitated high morale and the organisation to cope with change and additional work. Mutual respect between members and officers. Member recognition that officers always do their best and work hard to achieve the best possible outcomes. And a sense of pride in the organisation. But the latest survey shows we now have an inappropriate work environment, a blame culture with officers increasingly fearful to do their jobs and unlikely to go the extra mile for the organisation. The survey questions the council's future reputation as a good employer and the legal liabilities from employment-based claims against us. I believe the CEO's concerns are completely justified and absolutely right. What an appalling situation for us to be in. 6 months of vindictive disorientation and poor leadership. Chair, bullying in the workplace is against the law. The Cabinet and leadership of this council have a lot to answer for and should consider their positions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. The next speaker is Councillor Peter Faithful.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a few little things I noticed from the report. First is about officers commenting about working at home with basically inadequate equipment. And I'm curious to know how often or has anyone bothered to check the capacity of their own computers to check if their equipment has got they've suddenly getting all this workload at home, if their computers have got the capacity to handle the stuff. A simple thing like external hard drive to handle more storage can help an awful lot, because then dealing with computers is something that really can wind people up. I know it upsets my mother all the time. Stuff. But another one, this situation about working from home. At the town council meeting, it was pointed out that the virtual meetings is a 12-month legal thing. I don't know if Henry or Mark might be able to give us any more information as to what's going to happen at the end of, I think it's May is when the 12 months runs for. What if there's any information coming in from government as to, so getting us back to work properly. Third subject is I have had situations where I've had comments or reports or whatever, statements from officers and probably councillors as well, where what they've said is, how do I say it? I'm trying to say this tactfully, sort of untrue, and whether it's officers or councillors not deliberately trying to push something out, which people often assume, or whether it's people not fully understanding the subject they are talking about. One subject comes to my mind, hear it all the time, is people talking finance from a So, you know, how often is it people not trying to talk about something that they don't fully understand? Anyway, I think I'll finish there.
You're on mute, Chairman.
Thank you. I learned to control this one day. The next speaker is.
Would you like me to just come back to Councillor Faithful, Chairman?
Yes, carry on.
Well, just purely, Peter, in terms of helping with your questions. In terms of working from home and the possibility of inadequate equipment, all members of staff working from home carry out a safe workplace assessment. It's an online tool which we require, and the equipment which they use is provided by us. So it's laptops which are of an appropriate capacity, and also chairs, additional screens, that sort of thing. They are provided by us to facilitate working from home. In terms of meetings, I mean, yes, Henry will confirm, I'm sure, that it's a live debate at the moment as to whether the government extends the legal permission for virtual meetings to continue, or indeed whether it facilitates some legal change to go to hybrid meetings, but that's something that we're awaiting information on. As regards staff working from home or continuing to work from home, it's a view I'll sort of take probably end of May, early June. I have to be honest, for somewhat selfish reasons, as returning officer, I don't actually want many staff in Blackdown House during the lead up to the election, so I can have plenty of space for postal vote issuers and postal vote openers to operate in a COVID-safe manner. But we will need to look carefully at what guidance we give as to returning to the workplace, how frequently, that sort of thing. We'll discuss that with the managers particularly. And I'm afraid I didn't really catch the third comment because of the interference on the line. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Mark, for that. The next speaker is Councillor Mike Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I have arrived late when you were looking at declarations of interest, but I have none. I do apologise. The Chief Executive's report is concerning, and it's different from the view of some of the leading councillors, and one in particular. The Chair of Council wrote to me in February saying she was not aware of any bullying except for one individual. If you look at the data, then the absence increases caused by depression, stress and anxiety are serious and cannot be left to go without some kind of mitigation and resolution. The data between 2011 and 2020, which is a regular survey that the HR department run, showed no mention of bullying and harassment at all. So this has all arisen recently. And relationships that seem to have been soured and do not comply with our constitution or the Nolan Committee recommendations on standards in public life. And this issue of treating others with respect and avoiding bullying is a critical issue. I've constantly asked for mitigation issues to be clear. I've had dialogues with John Golding and Mark Williams and others, and there clearly is a good home working policy, a good mobile worker policy and a good office policy. But as John Golding says, I did make, and I have made a good point about the risk assessments being largely physical, and some attention is needed to the emotional, mental health side. And he undertook to have good discussions with the SMT about this. But I think there's only so far the SMT can go when some of the issues, if they're not dealt with, are resulting from the way in which leading councillors are behaving. 17% mention of bullying and 38% mention of harassment in the total, yes, thank you, in the total group of officers is unacceptable. We need clear mitigation measures. And we can even call in ACAS to do a collective conciliation for free. There is no good reason why these issues shouldn't be dealt with. I look to Scrutiny to come forward with recommendations urgently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. The next speaker I have on my list is Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to thank the staff for their honesty, because I've filled in questionnaires like this myself over the years, and I know how difficult it is to be really honest, because you know it's going back to the management, maybe not the same part of management, but it is quite difficult to be honest. So I thank them for that, and I note also that around 25% more filled in the survey this year than did last summer. I also know from my personal experience the importance of management, and councils are somewhat unique in the sort of management they have. I've worked in schools, and I know how critical the management in a school can be, and it all comes from the top, really. But you've only got a head teacher. But here, you've got both a senior management team and a political leadership. And it's important that they are working together and singing from the same hymn sheet. To some extent, I think the results we've got are probably to be expected. This has been an exceptionally difficult year for all of us.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, Colin, you've just muted yourself. Did you want to say?
Yeah, you're on committee, aren't you? So you should hold back till you get into committee before you speak.
My apologies. I was called. I was a bit surprised.
Sorry, I was. It was me that was in the wrong. Sorry.
No worries. I'll save it.
Yeah. Next one is Councillor Bruce DeSerum.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair. Following on from tonight's excellent speakers, I would just like to. I know tonight's meeting has focused on stress and factors in the workplace. I would like to note that that we've just heard from Mark Williams that staff do a safe workplace assessment, and I think that it's extremely important because, as ACAS say, that staff do derive greater job satisfaction from working from home. And I think that's been borne out where it says that 16 staff working from home have had a productive, positive increase in productivity. And I think that obviously the summer survey, clearly 34 people had problems with their screens, 15 required proper office chair, 15 were having printer problems, but clearly I believe that Mark Williams has just addressed those issues, and I think that they have been noted. So what I'd like to ask if the committee tonight could assess that for the work to be done productively in line with the ACAS guidelines on working from home, all the necessary equipment is provided to the staff as indicated by the Appendix 1, which I've just touched on, and that if home working is to continue after the pandemic, which no doubt we're going to get a further briefing on, the ICT should be made more reliable so that it ensures that working from home is as pleasant and stimulating as possible, so that ultimately the platinum investors in people status of the council is maintained for the benefit of the council and the residents of East Devon. So I'm not making a recommendation on that, Chair, but I'd like you to assess the evidence based in Appendix 1 and see whether you could ensure that these things are continued. I have every confidence in what Mark Williams said to us tonight about the safe workplace assessment, and I just feel that it's something that needs to be picked up on, because ultimately, as we said at the beginning of the meeting, the council as an employer will want to ensure itself that it is providing an appropriate working environment which minimises the risks of employment-based legal claims. So thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you all members present.
Thank you. Right, the next speaker is Councillor Tom Wright.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to say first is how saddened I am at this turn of events. if I can put back the clock to before 2019, when I was, as you know, a portfolio holder, and during that time I had 2 different portfolios. And the one thing that impressed me was the commitment, the energy, the enthusiasm, and the feeling of all the staff at all grades within the organisation, that we were a team working together with common objectives, common goals, to serve the residents of East Devon to the best of our ability. I can quote the examples. One of the big examples was rolling out the new waste and recycling system. Now, that caused a great deal of difficulty and extra work for our staff, because it was new to the residents, it was new to the teams. I know that our customer service desk, our communications people, everyone worked together as a team, putting up with a great deal of pressure, a great deal of anxiety, and I've got to say, sometimes, perhaps quite justifiably, very difficult contacts with our residents. But we got through that, and that was a period for stress. At about the same time, we had the move, or the proposed move, from Knowle to Honiton, and also significant numbers of the staff moving to Exmouth. Again, circumstances which caused a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of stress, and a great deal of uncertainty. And all I want to remark on again is the absolute commitment, energy, enthusiasm, and yes, good humour of the staff, who dealt with difficulties with the best endeavours and got on with the job. So that's, if you like, speaking on my experience of how this place, this council used to work until quite recently.
Thank you.
As I say, I'm completely saddened. And what also saddens me is the attitude of the current council, who, despite the turmoil caused by this pandemic, are pursuing what I think is a totally ill-timed concept of carrying out a review of how we do things. Let's get through this pandemic. Let's get through this emergency first, because I think to do otherwise is irresponsible, insensitive, and totally ignores the genuine concerns and feelings of our staff, which is probably exemplified in this survey. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I've still got a few more speakers to go. Councillor Davey Key.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. What I want to speak on is this bullying. I mean, in the 20-odd years that I've actually been on the council, everything has all gone swimmingly and everybody has been very happy. And I've found that when I've spoken to an officer or anything like that, I used to say, "How are you?" And they used to say, "Oh, fine." And now when you speak to them, they say, "Oh, okay." And you think, oh my word, you know. A mental health officer, I've never ever thought that we would ever need a mental health officer in this council. Now, going to the bullying, which I want to emphasise on, okay, it goes on in schools. Are we not adults now? And should this not be curtailed? I mean, surely these people should grow up and act their age, because in actual fact, all they're wanting is superiority, and superiority is got by a cowardice way. And this is what is happening. These people that are bullying are cowards, and they should be really named and shamed. But I'm not mentioning any names whatsoever. And I think it's absolutely disgusting the way that some of our officers, all right through the council, are being treated. What I would suggest is, if Mr. Williams, Mark Williams, wants any advice, it should certainly come from outside of this council, completely independent, nothing to do with anybody that is actually on this council, irrespective of what position they hold. And therefore, I would support that completely. But what is interesting in the fact is, no doubt with what I've probably said, no names have been mentioned, but if I do have any repetition or coming back at me, I shall have a very good idea as to those people who are causing all this bullying. And I wish that they would actually grow up and let's run a good council as it was before they actually came to power. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor, let's go down my list. I've got Councillor Denise Bickley next.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got much to say, just a few points really. I would just think that asking anybody how they were doing during the first lockdown, where the sun was out and it was a bit of a novelty, we were all out walking and enjoying Devon at its finest. Ask them now, after January and February of rain and another lockdown and insecurities and job insecurities and general anxiety, I think you would get quite a lot of people with the same kind of responses as these. I'm not trying to belittle it. It's important to address it for sure, but I think we have to put it into context. The survey says 38% of people were subject to personal harassment in the form of unkind words and behaviour. It doesn't actually say by who. We can read the comments, but 9 people mentioned councillors. It doesn't actually say it was councillors, so I would like to drill down a little bit further in that and find out what the issue is. Absolutely, we need to address it. But I think I know a few people who do work for the council, and some of them are very happy with the way things are going. Some of them are saying that it's management. So we just need to find an accurate picture of what's happened here. We've also made somebody redundant because their workload was deemed to be quite light. Now, that I cannot fathom. I don't understand how we don't have a head of HR now. When we're in this kind of situation, that absolutely makes it clear that we did the wrong thing during that meeting. Also, the last point I want to make was training for new councillors. As one myself, I really don't feel that I got much training about how to deal with officers, who to talk to when there's an issue, and actually where the line is between micromanaging and representing the people. So I think there's more training to be done there as well. So thank you very much.
Mark Williams, did you want to respond to that?
What particular point, Chairman?
Well, what the Councillor Bickley was saying regarding no HR or things like that.
Well, I'm mindful that the extraordinary council meeting required or requested Councillor Loudon to prepare a report for a future meeting of this committee looking into the history regarding that decision. So I don't think it would be appropriate for me to preempt what Councillor Loudon may find as part of his investigation. So I don't really want to comment on that, if you don't mind.
No.
Apart from that, I take note of the issue around maybe the need for more training for councillors in terms of how to be an effective councillor. That's certainly something that we can factor in.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, sorry, Chair. Sorry, do apologise. I find having a report like this in front of me, nearly 22 years I've been on this council, and it's the first time I've ever seen anything like this. It's the first time we've ever had a union rep, to my knowledge, come to our authority. And it's a really, really serious issue. I think when we start looking at the issues in front of us with depression, stress and anxiety, I think it's very good of Mark to put out a survey. I take the survey very, very seriously. What comes from that survey, I believe, I would like to think as a suggestion to the committee that there's a way forward in that we have more regular surveys. And I think that was set out partly by the Unison rep, and then that way you can manage partly understand where things are, understand where things are going, and hearing what members officers have to say. And I think that's really, really important. But one of the most poignant issues that seems to be raising its head is the fact around the stress and the COVID, the pandemic, and that is a very stressful issue. And I absolutely understand that and know that. But it's also clear of what has come back from the survey about the stress from the new administration has put in here, in the way some new councillors, whoever that may be, I don't really know, and how that is going forward, and the mistreating of officers. And I think if there's something that if I would like to add into the mix as a clear line and a delinear line about what is what and what I've learned in the many years that I've been a councillor, and I put this across to Mark, really, is that the clear line between what is strategic and what is operational. Mark Williams is the Chief Executive of East Devon District Council. He has a senior management team that he works with. That senior management team deliver the aspirations, the goals, the visions of the council through the process of a council plan, which is agreed and delivered by all of us as councillors. The role of the leader is to take charge of and be responsible for all councillors across the piece, regardless of political party persuasion. So I think my line here is we need to stop this micromanaging of officers, and people need to understand their roles. And I say that as a clear line to the management of East Devon District as councillors and to Mark Williams in his position. I'll leave it to there. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to take two more speakers. They are Councillor Pook and Councillor Moulding. Councillor Pook.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that given all the stresses, the staff still feel supported by colleagues and managers. And I also recognise that there are many other factors influencing morale at the moment, and these too need to be addressed. However, in spite of Councillor Loudon's comments, the most upsetting and serious claims do stem from the change of administration last year. So I'm going to be a bit more direct. I see the leader is wishing to speak, so I'm sure he will answer some of these questions for us. So does the leader accept the outcome of the report and that 18 of our staffs state new councillors and new political leadership are seriously mistreating officers, which is very stressful? This includes 7 members who say they are being bullied, intimidating and being harassed. Does the leader agree that this is totally unacceptable? Does the leader agree that as leader, he is totally responsible for the deplorable action of his administration? Does the leader agree that those responsible must consider their positions? And as leader, he should address this? And does the leader agree that as leader, holding ultimate responsibility for the actions and behaviour of his team, he should perhaps consider his own position? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, am I allowed to come back on this? Or
well, only
come in later?
Paul, only for 3 minutes and no more.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Although I'm happy to come in later if you wish.
Well, I want to tie this part of the meeting up. We've been going for an hour and a half at the moment, so I think these are going to be the last speakers.
Okay, I'll start with 3 minutes now then. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mark, for this report as well. This has been one of the most challenging times for local government in our history. I could not be more proud of our staff and our officers, and I think I have said that repeatedly and publicly over and over again. I am very concerned, however, that the focus of this meeting has been on the part of the report which has a political element to it. And we seem to have forgotten some very basic lessons. Correlation is not causation. So although Councillor Loudon was mocked for trying to drill down very slightly into what is a new councillor in this slightly unfortunate expression, new councillor stroke new political leadership, if we go to the first part of that sentence, that involves new councillors who are Conservative, from Cranbrook, Liberals, Greens, Independents, Independent Progressive Group and East Devon Alliance. There is no proof or indication from where any problems are coming. If it comes to the political leadership, I think I will just probably give a blanket no to all of the answers that Councillor Pook has given. And I will give two particularly, I think, important pieces of evidence. Exmouth has been toxic beyond belief for many years before my time. I came in and raised it through this very committee, Scrutiny, and we then set up a newly constituted committee for Exmouth, the Queen's Drive Delivery Group, that I have chaired with patience and courtesy. I have removed the poison from that. I have protected officers, and I have, I think, created a peace there where there was not a peace before and involved the public. And I would be astonished if any officers had any criticism of that whatsoever. That was a model of sorting out what had been a previous problem. I would also say that we need to be very careful about mental health and how this expression is used. It's quite tragic to hear it being bandied round in a political way. It isn't funny that I worked all I could to appoint both a mental health officer and a mental health champion. We have taken this extremely seriously. I think my final point would be is that there is another side to this coin, and we need to understand the members' perspective as well. And I hope that Scrutiny comes forward with a set of positive engagements, and I will be very pleased to present my own evidence and those of my cabinet. I am certain that they are innocent of any of these allegations of bullying, which, by the way, in this report are not identified as being anything to do with councillors. They may well be to do with management. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, the last two speakers I'm going to call, because I think we've heard enough of this at the moment, is Councillor Ian Hall is the next one, and then we do Councillor Andrew Moulding. Councillor Ian Hall.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to declare a couple of interests, one being a Devon County councillor and one a GMB union member. Many thanks to the Chief Executive for being so open and honest today, and root causes is definitely the key to gain solutions. Through you, Chair, to Mark Williams, we outside the leadership administration heard rumours that there were bullying and harassment of officers going on from cabinet members within East Devon District Council way before we became aware of the survey results. As the Chief Executive, and in your opinion, is this still affecting the health and well-being of those officers and therefore the council? Secondly, have you, the Chief Executive, received any other harassment and bullying since the DA administration was put in power? Why I ask is because I, like all councillors, received an email from you on the 23rd of October 2020 outlining the way you've been treated by one of the cabinet members. Finally, in your opinion, how can we as the elected members steady the ship and ensure that all officers, including yourselves, are supported to get the much needed healthier working environment to ensure all can go about their daily lives without unnecessary stress, to help us help them all, to become more confident and eventually enable a happier workplace that is conducive to the maintaining the Platinum Highest Investors in People Award, which East Devon District Council holds dear. On a final note, Chair, if I, as an elected councillor, have added to any officer's load during the pandemic, I am truly, truly sorry. And if I was ever implicated in any harassment and bullying, I can honestly say with hand on heart, I would stand aside because we cannot tolerate that sort of behaviour. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Right. Mark, did you want to come back on those points that have been raised by the last two speakers?
I'd rather not comment on what the leader said, if you don't mind. In terms of what Councillor Hall has said, is bullying ongoing? I would say yes, it is. Have I been personally bullied? I would say yes, I have. And in terms of can members steady the ship, I think fundamentally the core issue for yourselves is understanding what it is you all individually signed up to when you signed the Code of Conduct for councillors and the standards that you agreed to be guided by and to uphold. You know, bullying is mentioned in there. I appreciate micromanagement is mentioned in there, but bullying is certainly in there. And the issue is for you all individually, as currently 59, 60, if we've got a full complement, you all individually to be exemplars of the conduct that's expected within the Code of Conduct. And I say this deliberately because I've spoken, you know, as you'd expect me to, I've spoken to a number of the officers who are off sick with stress as a long-term condition. What's caused some of them to be signed off sick as opposed to continuing to work while stressed and depressed has been the sense that there is nowhere to go for officers where the issue is member behaviour, because the way the system is structured, unless the officer resigns, so is forced to leave their job, and then has to sort of raise a claim for constructive dismissal, which no employer in their right mind should think is a right way to treat staff. So unless the officer says, I'm so sick of this, I'm going to resign and claim constructive dismissal, the issue is where the behaviour is from a member is all you can do is a complaint under the Code of Conduct. And I've been honest with you, and you might not like me saying this, but officers look at the Standards Committee, they look at the way the Code of Conduct is not adhered to by a number of councillors, and they just see nowhere to go. And that sense of there is nowhere to go is what causes the illness, because it's something where you're just looking into an impossible situation for that officer to deal with. And that's my honest assessment as to how members can steady the ship. You know, do what you said you would do when you signed up individually to the Code of Conduct and be exemplars for the Code of Conduct, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Right, I'm definitely only going to take two more speakers and then we're going to committee. The first of those two speakers is Councillor Megan Armstrong and then Councillor Andrew Moulding.
Isn't Councillor Megan Armstrong a cabinet member, Chair?
Yes, she is. Right, so I will just take Councillor Moulding then.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm going to refer members back to a letter that we all received from a local representative of the trade union. This regarding an employment matter. And we then received a confidential letter sent to the union representative. And that letter was not sent to senior officers or the chief executive. And when I received that letter, I wanted to make sure that there were matters in there which were accurate. And I made inquiries regarding issues which were referred to in that letter. It was sent to councillors, and I found that there were multiple inaccuracies. I would call them blatant lies, which senior officers have found most upsetting. What does this do for staff morale? The officers of this council have been exemplary over many years and are now being undermined by the current administration. This cannot continue, and we must find a way of addressing the issue. And I trust that the Scrutiny Committee, when they now come to consider this issue, will make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. Right, I think we've got the gist of and flavour of what members think. So now we will go to committee to debate. Thank you. Committee. I see a number of hands raised there. We start off with Councillor Helen Parr.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I want to thank the Chief Executive for his extremely comprehensive report and his honesty to us all this evening. And I think we have had, from all councillors speaking, so many points made. It's been a very, very difficult subject and appalling that we've had to discuss the mental, the morale of staff being so low. I think it's extremely sad that this has come. And I want to propose various things for this committee. I hope to agree to recommend to council. Firstly, I think we should have a recorded vote on proposals, and I hope someone will second me on that.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Right, so I want to propose the following, and I'll send it to Henry. Firstly, the Chief Executive be thanked for his very thorough and comprehensive report. Secondly, the administration acknowledges the serious problem of decline in staff morale, which, if left resolved, will put at risk the council's reputation as a good employer and also possible legal liabilities in terms of employment-based claims. Secondly, in view of the recent lack of effective enforcement action in the case of a councillor found to be in breach of 4A and 5H of the Code of Conduct, the administration endorses the Member Code of Conduct and the Member Officer Protocol and gives an undertaking that it will take effective enforcement action in future where breaches of the code occur. And lastly, the Scrutiny Committee invites Councillor Arnott, Councillor Lowdoon and Councillor Gardner to attend a meeting of the committee to be arranged at the earliest opportunity to address the matters in the report of the Chief Executive and say how they intend to deal with this most serious problem. And this should include requesting the Chief Executive undertakes more regular staff surveys to monitor progress and, if necessary, involve an outside agency. And I hope someone will second that.
Do we have a seconder for that motion?
Yes, I will.
Sorry.
Councillor Chapman, I will.
Right, thank you. Did you wish to speak now, or?
Yes, I have a couple of things that I would like to ask the Chief Exec. Firstly, I am very sad about this. It is awful for our staff. And I would like to remind everyone that we have a duty of care to the Chief Exec. And the amount of stress that he must be under trying to look after the staff. I would also like to ask Mark, if I could please, about menacing emails online. Is there a, has he kept them? And does he realise who they're from, etc.? Do we know all that? And would the Chief Exec like to see an outside body be brought in to address this, the menacing emails online, rather than have lots of infighting in council. If I could, Chair, please.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry, just for I was going to ask Councillor Parr to send me through the recommendation, please. I need to check a couple of things. I wasn't quick enough to write it all down, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Right. Can you send that through, please, Councillor Parr?
Yep, I have.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to come back on what was said there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, in terms of emails I've received over time, there will be a record of those. I have to be honest, I haven't kept a separate file as such, but if it ever were to come to it, I could obviously do that work. But as regards an outside body, I think at this stage it's premature. I say that for two reasons. You know, our internal processes as an employer, as regards our IIP accreditation, mean that we do carry out regular surveys, and we are, you know, frankly, class leading in terms of the way, as an employer, we do try and deal with all issues, including mental health issues that staff are affected by, and we do have, you know, good policies in place, and the IIP accreditation is a reflection of that. I think for me at this stage, you know, a bit like I responded to Councillor Hall, there is an opportunity for the council laws to, you know, address this issue between yourselves, because my worry is that, you know, if we go down the outside body route, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time for a council to start to appear on the Secretary of State's watch list as potentially a council of interest. Traditionally, it's been, you know, councils that have got themselves into financial trouble, but actually, if you look at the criteria that the Secretary of State applies, financial trouble is one of them, dysfunctional relationships, poor corporate governance, and those types of matters, particularly affecting the three statutory officers, is an area where the Secretary of State does show an interest. So I don't want to be in that category, and I don't think as an organisation we deserve to be in that category. But what I do think is that, you know, councillors, you need to seriously, you know, take on board quietly what I think are the cries for help coming from staff in this survey, and ask yourselves within your groups, you know, how are we going to make sure that if Mark does a survey like this in, you know, 3 months' time, 6 months' time, because I will do, you know, we don't get the same results. You know, we are going to work, you know, hard with our teams to drill down into some of the answers, some of the issues, and try and see to what extent they're, you know, peculiar, and I use that in the true sense of the word, peculiar to individuals or peculiar to teams. But, you know, there is an opportunity now before the next survey is done for councillors to show that, as they say, they can comply and be exemplars for the code of conduct, frankly.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. The next speaker, Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just pick up where I left off. To some extent, this has been a very difficult year, and we should perhaps not be surprised at the results of the survey. Staff have had an incredibly difficult year of working from home, trying to juggle home life, homeschooling, childcare issues, sometimes difficult IT. So it's been a reflection perhaps of the national mood as well, that we all felt fairly optimistic in the summer that we were coming out of lockdown, we were coming out of the pandemic, and all of a sudden we've gone back into it. But I don't mean to belittle the staff survey. because I've already paid tribute to the staff who filled it in and their honesty and how difficult that can be. So there are definitely lessons to be learned here, despite these caveats about the survey and the fact that the two surveys were not exactly the same. But there are lessons for the management, and there are certainly lessons for the members. The management, I'm quite sure, can deal with the lessons they have. I think as members, yes, we need to reflect on our own behaviour. It's been queried why we need a mental health officer. Well, I think to some extent that's a reflection of an increased recognition of mental health around the country over the last few years. So perhaps we shouldn't be so surprised that we need a mental health officer. It's also been suggested that everything was absolutely fine and there was absolutely no bullying up until recent months. That's not what I've heard. So I will just put that in there. I don't think there's anything unique about the behaviour. I have reflected on my own behaviour, and I hope all of us have. I think we've all of us sometimes been a bit persistent. I know I have. And I have sort of sent emails saying, you haven't got back to me about this yet. But I would hope I've never been aggressive or bullying. But I can see how one person's persistence of constantly asking the same question could be seen as harassment or bullying. But I suspect that the kind of behaviour we're talking about is much more than somebody just being a bit persistent. We've had a change of administration, and change is always unsettling in organisations, and it does require good management. And we have to reflect on that, and especially in the current circumstances with the kind of year that we've had. We've got to remember we are in the middle of a pandemic. Mark Everton made the very good point that we need early intervention, and I think he's absolutely right. So we need definite actions to come from this, not a blame game from one side. And I've got to say some rather unjustified conclusions and assumptions being made, nor should we react defensively. I think we need to recognise that we do have a problem here and we need to decide how we're going to deal with it. I would suggest that we use the same survey in 6 months' time, not yet another different one. Let's use the same survey in 6 months and see if there's an improvement. So that we are making like-for-like comparisons, we'll know whether we're getting better or worse at this. It was also suggested that perhaps we take some of these main issues and survey down into them, and I think that's a very good suggestion, so I'd like to see that happen. And Mark Everton also made the point of asking what staff would like us to do. And it's a question that I know I've sometimes heard used in counselling. What would you like to happen? And that's the question I want to leave you with. What would you like to happen, apart from the resignation of the current administration? But what do you want to come out of this? What do we need to do? And all of us can reflect on our behaviour, but I don't want to see a blame game. And I'm rather disappointed at the way some councillors are queued up to throw everything at the door of the current administration, when that is not necessarily what the survey shows.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to come back on?
Well, it was just to hopefully provide Councillor Davey with some reassurance. So part of the reason I used the health and safety executive survey was the process that we follow as a consequence of what's been identified in the information I put in Appendix 2, and that is that there are follow-up meetings with the relevant teams to try and drill down into what is it in detail that needs to be further addressed. So, for example, I do know that if you were to take planning at the moment, part of the issue is that they're currently holding a live 600 applications, Whereas before the pandemic, they were holding a live 400 applications and they thought 400 was a lot. And now they're dealing with 600. And the way they work, which is traditionally team-based working, and they sit in their teams and they discuss opinions and judgments and assessments of particular applications, they are missing that as a way of sort of improving their judgment and improving their skill and their experience. So, you know, I know that there are things around the organisation which will be peculiar to individual teams, but what we will do is to drill down into those and come up with a set of, you know, solutions, if you like. And it is very much based on, you know, you've told us this, you know, what do you want us to do? What do you want to happen? So from a process point of view, I have confidence in using the sort of health and safety executive approach.
Thank you, Mark. I've got 5 more speakers that I can see in front of me. Councillor Rylands.
Thank you, Chair. That was a bit faster than I was expecting. Okay, so over the last year, we've all had to completely change our work habits. You know, as other people have mentioned, many of us are juggling at least 3 roles, including probably full-time childcare if we have small youngish children, or homeschooling. I would actually be surprised if there weren't more stress this year of all years, because everything has changed about us all in one go, and it's been hard to keep up with changes, and that's always going to unsettle us all, really. As far as the survey goes, what shone out for me when I read through the reports was how a lot of people are feeling overloaded with work. That seemed to be the sort of leading cause, and I think with the way pandemic responses had to necessarily take place at a very localized level, I think possibly our workload, as you know, as the CEO has just said, you know, even in planning, workload's gone through the roof. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what it's been like for the business rates team, for example, you know, or street scene, or any of the other people who've had to triple their workload. I mean, it's just horrific. My heart goes out to them. And as I said many times before, I think the whole staff body has coped absolutely admirably with a huge amount of stress and upheaval and change in the last year. So that was what I wanted to preface this with. So I did have a few questions. I don't quite know who they're probably going to be aimed at. And one of them, so possibly Mark, actually, so Mark Williams, CEO. So the HSC survey that you use this time, are you going to be using it in future? Is that the idea? So that's my first question. And it would be useful, I think, probably if we could get some information from possibly across the sector, but also maybe other sectors, to see if other industries and our own industry, but you know, in other places, are also experiencing similar rises in sickness levels and in stress. Because I suspect, you know, I think speaking anecdotally and speaking from, you know, the way we're all having to work, and everything's changed, I suspect that stress levels will be quite high this year in many other sectors, well, probably most other sectors, unless you have an absolutely lovely job like being a charcoal burner or something, where nothing really has changed much. Oh God, it would be nice being a charcoal burner. Sorry, I digress. So that's my first question. So are you going to be using the same survey in future? And could we get some information, some actual concrete information about whether other industries and our own industry, you know, other local authorities are suffering similar rates of stress and what's the word? Like, yeah, just upheaval, really, I suppose, and whether it's similar surveys conducted at similar sort of times of year, because we mustn't forget we've also just come out of winter, and I think a survey given in June is probably necessarily going to show slightly different mood levels than a survey given to people in January. And I do think that there could be something relevant there, and also the fact we're in third lockdown, not just come out of first lockdown. I mean, there's just so many different, there's so many variables between even the first survey from June and this survey just gone, that it's going to be difficult to draw some firm conclusions. But yeah, so the bullying, the question about bullying, I suppose I also wanted to find out, because I don't actually know what the survey looked like for June. how was it phrased in June? Was it phrased differently, or you know, is it sort of I mean, because I haven't actually seen the original survey basically, and I have seen this survey, but I haven't seen the previous survey. So I just wondered whether it had been phrased differently, or you know, whether, because in some ways the stress is not very remarkable, but the bullying, the mentions of bullying are remarkable. So I'm just wondering if there are any other contributing factors to all that. I think I will draw my remarks to a conclusion there. Yeah, we just need, I just would like to be sure that this latest survey does show staff morale getting worse, really, because I think it's a little bit difficult to compare last year's survey with this year's survey, given that it's kind of phrased differently and couched differently. Thank you.
Mark, would you like to come back?
Yeah, sure. Yes, for consistency purposes, I would propose to use the Health and Safety Executive survey again. As regards to information from other councils, yes, we can acquire some of that in due course, particularly their year-end figures. We can make comparisons for that in terms of sickness. But I think the key point I'm trying to get across to councillors in my report is it's my duty as the employer or the representative of the employer on behalf of the whole council to make sure that we provide a safe working environment for staff. So, you know, that's where the focus should be, not sort of necessarily patting ourselves on the back that, oh, well, it's worse down the road, so, you know, stop moaning about it, for example. The bullying thing, I think that's the issue around, you know, when you provide free text comments sections which allow staff to express or clarify why they've given particular answers. So, but what I can tell you as your chief executive is that, you know, staff morale is worse, and bullying hasn't been a feature, particularly in terms of, you know, perceived bullying from members, which staff are referring to in the survey that we most recently did.
Thank you, Mark. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands still raised. Councillor Fabian King, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I have to say that this survey came as a shock to me, and having 5 minutes ago heard the Chief Exec reprimand the councillors, the new councillors, I do feel frankly ashamed, and I apologise profusely for the trouble that has been caused. And what else can I say? The staff kindly passed out the backgrounds to the survey for the Health and Safety Executive, and I've looked at it closely, and I've worked with HSE in a previous life on 2 occasions and 2 different jobs, and they are platinum. They are first class, high pedigree. I circulated at about 4:30 to the cabinet this document, and it's only 2 pages. And if you just turn the page, it does say a survey is only the start of the risk assessment process. And the CEO has just given a clear indication of the path that then follows, which he is adopting, which is wonderful. So what we have heard today is only the start of the story. We've heard, so to speak, the significant interim report, the outturn of the questionnaire. What follows now is quite a lot of hard work, and it's going to be difficult in areas, not least because we are not like a typical sort of production or office commercial organisation, which HNSE so often serve. We have an elected political group adjacent to the organisation. So there are 2 things I want to say. One is that there has been a lot of change. Someone asked rhetorically earlier, what has changed to cause all this? A very useful comment, because it gives me a sort of a starting point. We've had a Conservative administration for 45 years, a chief executive at the helm for 13 years. And obviously things were very well bedded down, and the working relationships well understood. And of course, at each election, a repeat of that administration, it had a sort of a Darwinian establishment, which is great, which gives rise to a lot of effectiveness and efficiency, I'm sure. In fact, so much understanding between the two parties that things can only be tickety-boo. Then comes a new administration. It's a minority administration. We had a rocky start because of COVID and postponements of a full council to really get going. And I think because of being a minority administration, I might be sticking my head out here, my neck out, but the existing relationships still carried on. So there was quite a lot of inertia. And one of the first big issues that came up was withdrawing from GESP, as a few other district councils did, which was an upset without a doubt. Quite a few backs were put up. It was change in big measure. And I think that really, I'm not going to say anymore because you know what I'm talking about. It's change, and a change of direction is awkward. It's change takes more effort for people who have a lot of work and therefore a bit of routine, or a process, not routine, that implies the wrong thing. When there's a steady process, and then one has to also look up and watch out for what is different all the time, that is exhausting. And then we have COVID. It is a very unfair additional burden on all the staff. So where does this lead me? It's an odd request because, of course, I spoke with Councillor Loudon today because he has a wealth of experience and wisdom in this field. This exercise is between the chief executive and his staff. And what takes place is under his management, with his experience, and he has hit upon some really good points about longitudinal survey by staying with the same questionnaire and so on, learning lessons, and sheltering the organization from too much head above the parapet from government and so on. Great stuff. What I don't know what it is I'm asking. I'll tell you what the problem is. We have the members, we have the cabinet, we have fingers pointing at, well, without doubt, various people, but they are not being named. And so it comes out as being more general. That's the way it goes. And we are asked, quite understandably and politely by the chief executive, to look at the code of conduct and to manage ourselves according to it and closely remind ourselves to do so. I would like more than that. I would like to have some feedback of lessons from the next stage of this exercise, which is going to be managed by the chief exec. Not just lessons, I would like some sort of engagement, not in that process, because that is exclusive to the chief executive and the staff. But I'd like to have some engagement. I'd like to have, someone mentioned ACAS. That is another ball game. And I think the chief exec has already covered that. But I would like to have a better satisfaction in knowing what I can do to make things better. We know that housing, planning and street scene are the most exposed to difficult work environments, above and beyond having to work at home, and that they are overloaded for specific reasons, which are to a large degree affected by the changes that we are suffering from. And we want to know how we can engage better. I engage with the finance team and with planning extensively, street scene occasionally. And my heart bleeds for them, frankly, with the workload they've got. In fact, I backed off completely the other day because as a councillor, I have been inundated with objections for one particular issue that is occurring within X Valley. And all I can do about it is to say, yes, I will try and collate it and pass it on for attention. Equally, I am advising the residents who are objecting and complaining about what the process is, where to go other than EDDC with some of the elements of it, because EDDC does not actually come to bear on those aspects. I'm trying to do my best both ways, and the overloading from on the planning team in this case is such that they have to say, we'll cover this when it comes to the committee meeting, if it comes to that for a particular planning application. But this actually is not just related to the planning application. I won't go into detail, but it's very difficult to go with these issues, yet I have to represent the residents. So I've got difficulties. I don't know how to engage with them, or whether I just have to sit tight and put up with it. And going back, this is my last point, going back to when I was first elected as a councillor, I didn't know what to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I'd spoken to people about in trying to educate myself about being a councillor. I came into being a councillor, and my hair curled, as you can see, with some of the performance of some of the exchanges that took place, and worst of all, some of the email harassment that even recently still takes place. We all know about that. I really would like to have some engagement in this rather than just reflect on the code of conduct. I would like to have, and it's difficult, I'm sure, for the chief executive to do anything about this because we are a political party and he is apart from that. But perhaps the leader could come up with some suggestion. I don't know. I would like to do some work on our side as part of the membership of this council to sort things out rather than just read the code of conduct or sit tightly looking at the other political party, the other side of the fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got 1, 2, 4, 5 more people who want to speak. Can you just add to what's been said, or make your point sort of quite brief, because we have now been going for over 2 hours on this. Next person to speak is Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's 2 aspects really we can tackle tonight. There's the practical day-to-day issues that have been highlighted that are mainly going to fall to the SMT and the managers throughout the organisation. And it's a sort of a question for Mark, so I appreciate you've not put recommendations in this for obvious reasons. And it's just, have we, or are there additional resources or things that we can do as the effectively the employers to assist the managers and the SMT in delivering that part of their role? The second point is what we've basically been talking about all night. There's behaviour of unknown councillors. At the end of the day, we're all adults. We must have some kind of people skills to manage to have got ourselves elected. But I imagine likewise, if you go and ask people, are you guilty of these behaviours? I think most of us would say no, because I don't think there's a single person who's ever sat out to go, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to act inappropriately, or I'm going to breach the code of conduct. But clearly, either mistakes are being made or people are just getting it wrong. I think there needs to be some kind of call out where, Mark, you can ask and then speak to relevant leaders or the individuals themselves and go, either A, you didn't realise that you were behaving in that way and it came across there, or B, you need a clip round the back of the head now, you're being a fool, to put it politely. Obviously, then there's also standards, referrals. Clearly, there's also a membership training issue, and it's just, can we do something that makes some kind of mandatory code of conduct whether that's got to be you must do it, or even we'll publish a list in 3 months' time of everyone who doesn't attend whatever course to get us to where we really need to be. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a case of we all signed the code of conduct, but some people never read what they signed, unfortunately. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, Chair, I might have help on that. So when following the May 19 elections, everybody undertook standards training and signed to the effect that they had undertaken it. I mean, the difficulty is it's the difference between reading something and actually having it in practice, isn't it? And you can read something, but I think as Councillor Hawkins has alluded to, it's whether you appreciate your behaviour is on the wrong side of what is right, and if not, having it brought out. So, but everybody has undertaken the code of conduct training. That's not to say you can't have more. A refresher, yeah, I won't say the words you always said, but there are certainly options there. But it is a mandatory requirement upon election or being joining the council to have that training.
Yeah, I think the second or third thing down that we signed was treat people like to be treated yourself. Right, next speaker, Councillor Ranger.
Thank you. So obviously the first point I would make is that obviously bullying is never acceptable, and it's not acceptable member to officer, officer to member, member to member, in my opinion. It's something I raised at the peer review that I felt more could be done to improve officer-member relations or to address if things were going wrong. And I felt because I didn't feel it was adequately addressed. So that's why I didn't support the outcomes of the peer review. And I'm very glad. It's a shame it's taken this long for it to be addressed, but I'm very pleased to see that it is being addressed now. I'd like to see it addressed a little bit more. I know there's the code of conduct and there's the standards committee, but as has been already alluded to, I think it needs, inappropriate behaviour needs nipping in the bud. And there's a kind of the modern term restorative justice, where you might bring somebody in and say, are you aware of the impact that you're having on this person? And ideally you would have, the two people in the room that, the accuser and the accusee, as it were, to, nip it in the bud and just say, we're just not tolerating this, and it needs to, it needs to stop. We've all got to work together for the common good. It's not acceptable that 5% of the respondents overall from the entire workforce mentioned bullying, but we do have to remember that 95% didn't mention it. I'm not saying it's acceptable that 5% did. I'm just saying we mustn't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mark Everton referred to staff turnover, and I was pleased to see that staff turnover actually in this quarterly report that we're going to look at shortly is down to 6.51%. And just a few years ago, when we were presented at Scrutiny, it was at 10%, which I was quite surprised by at the time. The different landscape between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2 has already been mentioned. So it's a completely different feeling now. I imagine in lockdown 1, when we all came out in June, we wouldn't even dream that we were going to have the second and third lockdowns. So it's no wonder, with the prospect of not being able to go away or have a break for the foreseeable future, makes a very big impact on people's overall well-being. I'm pleased that it's now been established that the same survey will be used in subsequent staff surveys. So that's very pleasing. It's also very unfortunate that just at this time, this horrible lockdown that we're going through now, as Mark Everton said, we had lost one of our most experienced and steadying senior members of staff who could have helped the staff to keep the calf calm and manage the ship. With regards to a mental health officer, somebody said they were quite shocked that one is needed, and I think we must recognise in this day and age that mental health is more open. Many organisations recognise that we need a mental health officer now, so that people don't bottle things up and that people feel safe even the fact now that people feel safe to mention the problems, you know, we've got to see that as a good thing. It's not good that they're feeling that way, but it's good that they feel that they can say it, and we should be demonstrating to them that we're taking it seriously and it's going to be dealt with. So it's very good that we have a mental health officer in place. This organisation, I think, I don't know if it's unusual, but it's quite a large organisation. We don't have an occupational health officer also, which could also help the staff through. So in addition to all those pressures, we've got population growth, we've got staffing numbers down, and we've got the additional pressures of the epidemic, as we've already mentioned. So on obviously teams that are showing the greatest stress, planning, housing and street scene, of course, they're the ones that are coming under the greatest pressure. I think as Fabian's already, Councillor King, I beg your pardon, has already referred to, probably each of us feels we could keep an officer occupied with our own patch. You know, and sometimes you do think to yourself, well, I'd like to take this up, but, you know, I'm aware of how busy they are. So, you know, that's a fine line for us to juggle. If we don't push a point, you know, our residents are thinking we're not supporting them. And when you see how busy the officers are and how stressed and how burdened they are, you know, sometimes you hesitate to contact them. So, but moving forward, obviously, we need an action plan. This needs addressing. And I do have some recommendations to make. I don't know if you want me to make them now or if you want me to wait until all your speakers have finished. But I think we do need an action plan. And, you know, we do need to remember to take a balanced view. There's a lot of positives in the survey as well, of course, as some, you know, issues that are of great concern and cannot and must not be swept under the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we've got one recommendation that's been proposed on the table. We'll vote on that one first before we come back to you for a second recommendation. We've got three more speakers left. Councillor Johns, Councillor Wright and Councillor Chubb. I'll start with Councillor Johns first.
Thank you, Chair. So, as everybody said previously, and I don't want to keep going over it, we are in the middle of a pandemic. It's been going on for 12 months. The first 6 months were quite novel. Everyone was quite, you know, the weather was nice, etc., etc. Then obviously time's gone on and it's got worse and worse. There's been people with working from home, although everyone thinks it's a jolly, it's not, it's really hard. As a general rule, when you're in the office, you can speak to the person opposite you. If you've got a query, it can get answered straight away. You can deal with the issue straight away. However, when you're working from home, you have to email or call that person, wait for the response, etc. Your workload then builds up, which means you've got even more work to do than you originally had to do, which is stressful for anybody, okay? So, and obviously with the pandemic, as has been pointed out already, lots more people are working from home, but there's also lots more issues that we're all having to deal with, not only councillors, but staff and officers, okay? Somebody mentioned earlier about a mental health officer. It wasn't heard of 20 years ago. That doesn't mean it wasn't needed. It's just that it hadn't been recognised. Completely different thing altogether. It is something that is needed. It's needed across the board for lots and lots of people. Shaking your head is also a sign of rudeness. Thank you very much. We have other issues as well, as quite rightly pointed out earlier. Mark Williams pointed out he has a duty of care to his staff. Now, above and beyond everything, every person at this meeting has a duty of care to the staff that work at East Devon District Council. We cannot facilitate any of the work that we're doing without their assistance. And I cannot believe that we're even having a conversation on bullying or being rude to people. You know, I hear all the time since I joined the council in 2019, political banter. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's just another excuse to bully somebody under a different name. And it's not right. So if there's bullying going on in any way, shape or form, at any level, it needs to be stamped out and it needs to be stopped. And I thank the officers and I thank the staff for bringing this to our attention. And I'm sure it's probably happened before and it wasn't dealt with. But we will deal with it because this cannot be allowed to carry on going and it cannot be allowed to escalate. You know, we have a duty of care to everybody across East Devon, but most importantly, to the people that we're supposedly working closely with. The staff and the officers that go above and beyond, that have got an additional workload at the moment. They've lost members of staff. They've got members of staff off through sickness. Well, we all know what happens when a member of staff goes off with sickness. The workload for those left behind is increased even more so. So how do we help them? By by emails and things that are going around. That's not helping anybody. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help our cause. I agree with what was mentioned earlier. As a fairly new councillor, I turned up at Honiton, and as everybody knows, we'd just moved to the building. I didn't even know which floor I'm supposed to be going to for the meetings. Did anybody point me in the right direction? No. Did anybody help? No. Democratic Services stepped up. Democratic Services took over and showed me where I needed to be and who I needed to speak to. But there's no list of people to talk to. So you end up getting in touch with people and adding to their workload with something that's nothing to do with them. But once you've found your feet and you can find your way, then it's not so difficult. So basically, I think we do need to have an action plan. People do need to go back and reread their code of conduct, and they need to accept the fact that they have signed up to it. And, you know, somebody said earlier, I think it might even have been you, Chair, treat others how you would like to be treated. Unfortunately, some people don't seem to care. Some people are quite happy to treat people in a negative way, and it doesn't make any difference to them. Personally, I don't like it. I'm hoping that in every email I send and every communication I've ever had with anybody, regardless of whether it's councillor or staff, I've been kind, I've been courteous, and I've accepted that they have a heavy additional workload. Now, this needs to be dealt with, okay? To be perfectly honest with you, an awful lot of the meetings I go to, it would work a lot better if people, and I'm talking about the council here as a whole, not the officers, not the staff, of people put their ego and their politics at the door before they entered, stopped with the stupid political bantering, which doesn't help anybody, worked with the officers that know their role and know what they're doing. It's pointless changing for change's sake. If they know what they're doing, let them do what they're doing. Ask them for additional help if you need it. But at the end of the day, if we all work together as one big unit, we wouldn't keep having all of this. Why can't we just work together? Does it make any difference which political side you're on? Seriously? Grow up. So, but I do think at the end of the day that we need to support the staff, we need to support the officers, and we need to do our utmost to make sure that nobody feels they've got nowhere to turn. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Wright, then Councillor Chubb. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Mine will be very short and sweet because a number of previous speakers have raised some of the issues that I've seen. I've never written as many notes in a meeting before this one tonight. You know, and we are all finding ourselves in a position that we're all very uncomfortable with, I'm sure. I think it's great having a platinum award, lovely certificate on the wall, unless we as members then uphold those requirements, it's pretty worthless. And we should be slightly embarrassed about that. I think really there are so many factors outside of our control that we as members can have very little impact on. What we have to look at and what we have to look for our officers to do is to, as I believe Councillor Hawkins said, look at how that workload can be addressed. And I would hope that the CEO would come back to us with, you know, requirements to make that a more achievable level of work for the officers. To have a never-ending pile on your desk must be incredibly difficult for any of these guys coming into work every day. So I think really where I'm coming from is respect needs to be back across the board, particularly when dealing with officers. I think one of the things we really just need to do is remember what the workload we can be putting on these officers by asking for additional things. Every meeting I attend, there's more and more and more going on top of the workload of our staff. Now, we need to manage that. We need to manage our own expectations of members of the team we have in place. And we need to look at what we do collectively, whether you're in the opposition or the lead group, how we individually deal with officers and take your own responsibility for your actions. And I think that's a really key thing, to really just take responsibility from the top to the bottom of how we conduct ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one last speaker, Councillor Ian Hall.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, fellow members, and any officers or anybody who stayed up this late listening to this debate that we're having here. I became a councillor in 2007, and obviously I found it hard to find my way around the old building and the way of working with the council. I became a cabinet member in 2011, so 4 years later, I had a little bit more of an input into how the council worked, but then I had to learn again how things worked with the council. One thing I can say though is definitely the officers do the work and the staff, and the councillors maybe guide the ship a little bit. So the way to work with them is to work by asking rather than telling them what you want to have done. Quite often you get better results. You get the odd favour called in every now and then from departments like street scene and stuff, if you ask nicely if they can come and sort a problem out you have in your ward, rather than just telling them you need it sorted out. So I think the best thing is for people just to have a bit more understanding and work harder with the staff and the officers. Definitely the staff and the officers are all working a lot harder with budgets that are being squeezed everywhere. So they're trying to work smarter. We've got to work with them and help them and do a lot more. And I can understand that maybe some bullying has gone on through the keyboard warriors, as I call them. I know on social media, you get people put things down on social media, and they probably regret what they've done after they've done it, but it seems easy at the time. And maybe they've been sat in their chair and they might have had a drink or something, but I would advise people quite often, and I've always been taught, when you write something, read it through a couple of times and maybe not actually send it till the day after, because you might have a different thought. So anyway, I won't stay waffling because a lot's already been said, and I'm dying to get my tea because I finished work and came straight into the computer, and I'll let everybody finish up and take it from there. Thank you.
Right. But we've at the moment we've got one proposal on the table, and there's another one going to come. Can we vote on the first proposal first, and then we'll listen to the second one?
So, Chair, I've looked at the wording. I'll read it back for members who may not recall what was said. There is an issue with one of the recommendations, which I'll flag up. There are four recommendations as part of this proposal. Two of them will effectively result in scrutiny taking a decision. Two will require an onward recommendation, and given the wording, I think necessarily that means it goes to Cabinet. But I'll explain as I go through. So the first one, which would be for scrutiny resolution, is that the Chief Executive be thanked for his very thorough and comprehensive report. The second one, it would be a recommendation to Cabinet given the wording. That is that the administration acknowledges the serious problem of a decline in staff morale, which if left unresolved will put at risk the council's reputation as a good employer and also possible legal liabilities in terms of employment-based claims. Three, also a recommendation to Cabinet, in view of the recent lack of effect, and this one I've had to amend slightly, I think, because of the way it was phrased. So I'll read both. In view of the recent lack of effective enforcement action in the case of a councillor found to be in breach of 4A and 5H of the Code of Conduct, the administration endorses the member Code of Conduct and the member officer protocol and gives an undertaking that it will take effective enforcement action in future where breaches of the codes occur. But of course, being a recommendation to Cabinet, that is a function that sits, well, first of all, with the monitoring officer, but then secondly, with the Standards Committee. So I think it needs revision so that after member officer protocol, it reads and states its expectation that effective enforcement action is taken in future where breaches of the codes occur. because it's not something that Cabinet of itself can do. And then the fourth recommendation is again for Scrutiny to resolve, and that is that the Scrutiny Committee invites Councillors Arnott, Loudon and Gardner to attend a meeting of the committee to be arranged at the earliest opportunity to address the matters in the report of the Chief Executive and say how they intend to deal with this most serious problem. This should include requesting the Chief Executive undertakes more regular staff surveys to monitor progress and, if necessary, involves an outside agency. The only thing I'd say is of itself, that is fine. It's somewhat unusual perhaps for the Chair of Council to be invited, but you're entitled to make the invite. Obviously, if it's declined, then you can't oblige her to attend. You could conversely oblige Councillors Arnott and Loudon as Cabinet members, leader, portfolio holder respectively, to attend. But as written, it is fine, just but bear in mind the ability to decline if invited. So that's what's on the table, Chair. And my advice is that you amend recommendation 3, as I've said, and I hope the proposer is happy with that.
Yes.
I agree. I agree with the amendment that you've recommended. Thank you.
And who was at the second, the proposal?
I was.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right. Now, Henry, do we vote on this now and then come to see what Councillor Ranger's got to?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. So, Chair, it will be a green tick, red cross as before. But if this is accepted, that may negate what Councillor Ranger wants to say. If not, it may just be an additional recommendation that Councillor Ranger would like to propose. So, yes, you'll go on and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Chairman, I did also ask that we have a recorded vote.
Yes, sorry, quite right. Sorry, it's green tick, red cross. It's recorded, isn't it? I beg your pardon. You're quite right, Councillor. I've even written it down all over the pages.
Yeah. So do we go to Councillor Ranger to see what she has to say, or do we just vote on this one first?
No, you need to take this one now, and
right.
Then you can come to Councillor Ranger.
Right. And I have to ask the committee if they all accept a recorded vote. Yes.
No, yes, that's right. It's been moved and proposed, so you need to have a vote first.
Yeah. Right. Are we all in agreement with a recorded vote? Can you tick your appropriate box, please?
So green tick in favour, red cross against. I've got 11 in favour, no against, so that's carried, Chair.
Yeah.
So you'll now do a recorded vote on the main proposal, as I read it, as amended.
Thank you, Chair. I'll
Sorry,
call each member.
Chair, can I just ask a quick question, please, on the proposals, if I may?
Yeah.
Are we doing it as a block proposal or each one individually?
On a block, I would think. Is that correct, Henry?
It's up to you, Chair. I mean, they've been put forward.
Well, I would like to take on a block if possible.
But there's quite a lot of points there, and some of them I think people would vote for, and some people might vote against. So it's quite difficult to do it if there's a block of all of them together. If you see my drift. Just a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think personally it was put forward as a block of 4 recommendations.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be taken that way, unless the proposer or seconder and the chair agree a different way. But I think that's how I would advise.
Well, yes, I think it'd be best to take it on block, and then we can go to Councillor Rylands then. So can we take
Ranger, Chair?
Ranger, sorry. Councillor Ranger, I'm very sorry about that.
I don't mind. You just might call the wrong person.
Thank
Right,
you, Chair.
we-
Are you ready for me to call for
Yes.
the recorded vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Brown,
In favour.
Councillor Ranger,
Against, sorry.
Councillor Chapman,
For.
Councillor Chubb,
For.
Councillor Coleman,
Against.
Councillor Davey,
Against.
Councillor Hawkins,
Against.
Councillor Johns,
Against.
Councillor King,
Against.
Councillor McCollum,
Against.
Councillor Parr,
For.
Councillor Rylance,
Against.
Councillor Taylor,
Against.
and Councillor Wright.
For.
That's clearly lost, Chair.
Yeah. Right, we go to Councillor Ranger.
Thank you. The recommendations I would like to put forward, I'd like to do one by one, if that's well, that's what I'd like to do, put them forward one by one. So the first recommendation that I'm happy to do is I was going to suggest that we note the report, but I'm very happy to take on the first part of Councillor Parr's recommendation that we thank the Chief Executive. I'm happy with that element. So can either note the report, which I never quite understand what that means, seems a bit pointless, or but I'm very happy to thank the Chief Executive for bringing the report to this council. That's recommendation 1. I'm just going to carry on with my separate recommendations. My second recommendation was going to ask for, ask the Chief Executive to undertake a follow-up staff survey at a suitable future point. I was going to ask him to confirm what survey he's used, but he has already confirmed he is using the Health and Safety Executive one. That's my recommendation 2, to ask the Chief Executive to undertake a follow-up staff survey at a suitable future point. Number 3, request the Chief Executive to discuss this survey data with the staff representatives and to feed back to the portfolio holder for council and corporate coordination the outcome and actions resulting from that engagement to form an action plan. And number 4, recommends that the Chief Executive, members of SMT and the portfolio holder for council and corporate coordination discuss this survey data and any other relevant information and identify what actions are necessary to address the 4 key broad sets of issues identified within this report at Appendix 3. And that is workload, staffing shortages and vacancies, and management for support staff, home working and staff isolation, member engagement with staff, and staff communications. And my 5th recommendation is to ask the Chief Executive to update this committee in light of the completion of the above 4 recommendations. I'm just going to summarise why I think those recommendations are useful, is because they are not prescriptive, and I don't think they are prejudgmental. I think they are open, and we're not telling anybody what the outcome should be, and that is why I'm putting these proposals forward. Thank you. If we could take them one by one.
Right, can I just add something to your proposal? Your follow-up, there's no time, they can follow up every year the way you've worded that particular proposal.
I'm happy with Colin to put in a time frame. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that they should be at short bursts, so to speak, sort of 6 to 8 weeks each one, because that way you've got more chance of stamping out if there's any problems within the authority.
Okay, point, I'm going to come back on that. To me, that sounds a little bit too frequent. We always had a saying in teaching that constantly weighing the pig didn't make it any fatter. And I imagine staff surveyed every 6 to 8 weeks could possibly have a little survey fatigue. I don't know, but perhaps 3 months. I'll be happy with 3 months or 6 months. But yeah, I'm very happy with that.
The reason I say sort of 6 to 8 weeks is, I know someone that was in a high power position with regards to in a similar sort of position to Mark, basically. And they had short surveys like this every 6 to 8 weeks. And they managed to get the gist of what was going wrong quite quickly. Whereas if we leave it a long time, with large gaps, it would, it could still repeat itself the way it is at the moment. So,
okay, well, I don't.
Perhaps 12 weeks minimum.
Do you know? Do you know what I would like? I think I would like to say that they will bring that. They will make that decision based on.
The meeting's only finishing. We've got 10 minutes of it.
I think someone's got their microphone on.
No, let me just mute all and then unmute Councillor Ranger and Councillor Brown again.
Thank you. Do you know? I take your point, but I think perhaps it would be when the chief executive reports back to us after his discussion, he can tell us how frequently it would be deemed suitable to resurvey staff. So I'm not supporting the time constraint that you're putting on at the moment.
Could I also just ask for some clarification, Chair?
Is he on mute? You're on mute, Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you can ask for clarification.
Could I think it was the fourth recommendation? Could Councillor Range just read that back? Because I'm mindful I've got to report back to staff on how the committee responded to the concerns that staff raised, and the fourth wording sort of suggested that the committee wasn't at all accepting of some of the concerns that staff had raised.
Oh, I wasn't aware of it coming across like that. Let me read.
So I just wanted to check.
Yeah. So recommends that the chief executive, members of the SMT and the portfolio holder for council and corporate coordination discuss this survey data and any other relevant information and identify what actions are necessary to address the 4 key broad sets of issues identified within this report at Appendix 3. So number 1, workload, staffing shortages and vacancies, and management support for staff. Number 2, home working and staff isolation. 3, member engagement with staff. And 4, staff communications.
Okay. All I can say is I think there may be some disappointment on the staff side if it's referred to as member engagement with staff.
Does anybody want to, are there any members of Scrutiny that want to suggest an improved wording to that particular item, member engagement with staff?
Councillor John said maybe members' conduct with staff.
Well, see, what concerns me, I know we have this issue, this 5% of staff unhappy, but I'm concerned about leading.
Can I just interrupt there? It's not 5% of staff, it's 5% of staff that completed the survey.
Well, so I don't think it is actually, because I think I worked out the numbers on 490 full-time staff. So, I haven't got my figures to hand. So I think what I was saying was 67% of people responded. So presumably some of them didn't have something to say. So I think I'm correct. I'd have to go back and look at that. Oh, let me just work out. Hold on. Anyway, perhaps I'm getting sidetracked. Actually, clearly, you've all seen the reports. A number of staff. What I'm saying is that the percentage isn't the percentage of people that responded. I am talking about overall, out of all your staff that all had the opportunity to say what they wanted to say. The figure. I think we have to be careful not to assume that that we can't assume that people didn't respond because they were unhappy any more than we can assume that they did respond because they were unhappy. That's what I'm saying. So people had a chance to say what they wanted to say, and the figures are there in the reports for you to work out your percentages if you disagree with mine. But it's clearly, it was not, you know, a huge percentage, but it's important. I'm not brushing it under the carpet. And it's, as I said, I raised it at the peer review many years ago. What could we do to improve member and officer relations? You know, what work could we be doing on that? So I'm very happy to see it here. So yeah, so I'm happy to leave it unless anybody else is going to offer an amendment to point 3 of item 4.
Right. What was point 3 of item 4?
Member engagement with staff.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sorry to come back, but you know, the staff have been very specific about what they are complaining about with regard to some member behaviour. You know, I don't want Scrutiny to shoot itself in the foot by using wording that suggests it's being brushed under the carpet. I think, you know, I'm just giving you my advice. If you want to help establish good working relationships with the staff, there needs to be a sense of honesty coming through in terms of, have you actually listened to what the staff are saying, or could staff come back to me and said, Mark, they sound a bit tone deaf to me?
May I bring up a couple of other words that we could use possibly? Members' behaviour with staff. Would that cover all the bases? As Councillor Ian just quite rightly pointed out, we do not want to sweep this under the carpet. We need the staff to know that we are taking this seriously. You know, as I said earlier, you know, this is something that absolutely appalls me, and I would not put up with it in any aspect from anybody. So the thought of it, of any member of staff thinking that after all this has come to us, we've just gone meh, which obviously isn't what we're doing. But does the phrase, I mean, we've got some members of staff here. Does the phrase members' behaviour with staff reflect accordingly?
Chair, this is about future conduct. Could we just use those words, and future conduct?
Well, I was wondering whether the recommendation should be that we have quarterly staff surveys and we have a dedicated person to report to if there are any problems.
Okay, so sorry, Chair. I mean, don't get hung up about the regularity of surveys, because you know, at best, I would only want to do the health and safety executive survey every 6 months, because that's the guidance that you ask staff to have regard to the previous 6 months. So for me, there's a natural requirement in 6 months' time, slightly less than that now, but anyway, 6 months from when the first survey was done, to have another one. So you're talking, where are we? February? Is it August, September, October? And in between that, the issue is our ability to sit down with staff, run some focus groups, run some meetings to sort of say, right, let's get under the skin of the replies that you're mentioning. All I'm saying to you is that from my perspective as chief executive, I think staff have been exceptionally brave in what they're saying. And if staff perceive that, there is any sense that members have gone, to sort of paraphrase Councillor John's nair type thing, it's going to backfire in terms of what we want to achieve for the future, which is this one team working, if you like, between councillors and officers.
Okay, how about if we amended it, so member engagement with staff and improving future member engagement with staff and improving future conduct? I don't know.
Well, how about that we have 6 monthly staff surveys, and that we have a dedicated person to whom they can report if there are any problems. And that way we are looking after the staff, and if there's any problems, they go to that dedicated person who then comes to the appropriate person to report it to.
Okay, so sorry to come back, Chair. I am that dedicated person.
Yes.
Fundamentally. I am the head of paid service.
Yeah.
So, you know, all those
So
systems are in place.
Right.
What I'm trying to guide, if you like, is the communication that comes back from this committee to the staff. And I'm just saying you need to think about how it's going to be perceived if there is suspicion or cynicism on the part of how members have responded to this.
Okay, I would add a word then, perhaps to leave point 3 as member engagement with staff, and point 4, improved staff communications, as a way of just addressing improved staff communications. Those are my recommendations. I think we should vote on them. They can stand or fall on there.
If the, you know, that doesn't work, improving staff.
Are you vetoing the recommendation, Chair?
Yes, because I mean, there's no recommendation given to us, but the problems have been given to us, and we haven't addressed them as such.
So could I just take some legal advice then, Henry? Is that so? If I put a recommendation forward, it can just be vetoed. Is that correct?
It's not, no, it's not vetoed, but it hasn't been seconded yet. I'm still not. I think there's a lot of conversation about exactly what you're putting forward. Well, I say that. If the last point said is what you're putting forward, then that needs to be. But it seems like lots of people who are having conversations about actually what it is, and you are sort of adapting.
We need to put something forward to protect the staff.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Ranger needs to put on the table what she wants the recommendation to be. That then needs to be seconded, and if people want to make amendments to it, then that follows on.
Okay. So do you want me to go back? How am I going to do this one by one? The recommendations.
Well, I think we're clear apart from
number 4.
4.3.
4.3. Okay. Right. So I'll accept then that 4.3 might need a tweak. If somebody can suggest a word or 2 tweak, but I'm not going to replace it with a lengthy thing about how often.
Well, we're going to go back through the cycle again. I think you need to say what you want, Councillor Ranger, and then that can be seconded and go forward.
Okay. Right, I'm going to leave it as it is then.
Can I second it?
Yeah, well, I was going to second it. Okay.
But Councillor Ranger, can you read out what it is you on that number 4? Read it out, because I think just 2 words will make it good.
Understood. So recommends that the Chief Executive, members of the SMT and the portfolio holder for Council and Corporate Coordination discuss this survey data and any other relevant information and identify what actions are necessary to address the 4 key broad sets of issues identified within this report at Appendix 3. Number 1, workload, staffing shortages, / vacancies, and management support for staff. Number 2, home working and staff isolation. Number 3, member engagement with staff. And number 4, staff communications.
May I suggest that member engagement with staff is replaced by member conduct with staff?
Yes, I would accept that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's now on the table.
Thank you.
As a proposed and seconded motion.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Parr, your.
Could we have a recorded vote on this, please?
That's seconded, Chair.
Right, been seconded, Jess?
I'll second it.
Right, are we taking these separate or on block?
I think they should need to be separate.
Well, I'm not sure they can be actually reading them, because your 5th one, it talks about incompletion of the 4 recommendations above.
Yeah, no, you're right. En bloc. Sorry, I'm getting weak with hunger now. I'm so sorry. My blood sugar, my brain, I'm just not functioning. I'm so sorry. Yeah, let's go en bloc. We all want to eat. Sorry.
Excuse me, Chair, we haven't voted on whether we're having a recorded vote yet, have we?
No, and this time I hadn't forgotten. Yeah, so first vote is a recorded vote. It's a green tick, red cross, Chair. If you're happy, I can just ask for it, or you can.
Yeah, no, we're doing a green tick.
Yeah. So if you can vote then in favour of a green tick, against the red cross, please. That's 13 in favour, Chair.
Yeah, I can't find my green tick. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
So that's a recorded vote on the main motion then. Do you want me to read it back as I've got it?
Would you like?
Yes, please.
I know I've heard it a few times, but so you all are aware. The committee, firstly, thanks the Chief Executive for his report. Secondly, asks the Chief Executive to undertake a follow-up staff survey at a suitable future point. 3, request the Chief Executive to discuss this survey data with the staff representatives and to feedback to the portfolio holder for council and corporate coordination the outcome and actions resulting from that engagement to form an action plan. 4th, recommends that the Chief Executive, members of the SMT and the portfolio holder for council and corporate coordination discuss this survey data and any other relevant information and identify what actions are necessary to address 4 key broad sets of issues identified within the report in Appendix 3, workload, staffing shortages, vacancies and management support for staff, home working and staff isolation, member conduct with staff, staff communications, and 5thly, ask the Chief Executive to update this committee in light of the completion of the above 4 recommendations.
Right, you've all heard the...
Thank you, Chair. You ready for me to call?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
I don't agree with it because it's not protecting the staff enough.
You're against?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Chubb.
Against.
Councillor Coleman.
For.
Councillor Davey.
For.
Who?
That's Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
For.
Thank you. Councillor John.
If that's me, for.
Johns.
Yep.
Do you want me to carry on? Councillor King?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, Wendy. If you can take over, please. Councillor Johns is the last one we've got.
So Councillor Johns voted for, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. So Councillor King?
For.
Thank you. Councillor McCollum?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parr?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright?
It's gone.
Councillor Wright, are you
It's gone.
there? Okay. So we've got 1, 2,
I'm here.
3, 4.
I'm back.
Oh,
So I live in the
Councillor
sticks.
Rudd.
Against.
Against. Thank you. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against.
Harry, Chair.
Yep. Right, we've been going now for I don't know how many years, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Can we postpone the rest of the meeting till next time? Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah, can I just come back?
Yeah.
Can I also put forward that we look at the equipment that some of the staff need that they're finding hard to do their job without? Can we look at that, please? Because it's one of the requests coming through from the staff that they need a bit of help there.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the chief exec thinks on that, please.
Henry, Mark, is that anybody?
Well, every request we've received from staff for additional equipment has been met, as far as I'm aware, and certainly when you're next in Blackdown House, you might see it looking a bit empty because a lot of the equipment that staff would otherwise have used at their desks is actually now being used at home, for example. And the same applies to a degree at Exmouth Town Hall. So aside from staff's own internet connections maybe and or issues affecting all of us in terms of the reliability of the systems that Strata provide, that I'm not aware there's anything we actually have left to give staff in terms of any issues, but it is known that they only have to make a request and we assess it.
Only it was in the survey, Mark.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But that's part of what will come out of any drill down, any drill down for the teams of the survey results.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and...
Chair, sorry, I didn't get, did you get the consensus of the meeting to postpone the other items?
Yes, I got loads of thumbs up when it came to that bit.
I was writing at the time, sorry.
Yeah. Looking to close the meeting. Right. Sorry. That brings this meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, I can just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. Until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you.